And good evening. This is Jeff Berger tuning in from Cape Coral, Florida, with our series of Getting to the Root of It. And we're at series number 6 with anxiety, depression, and suicide. And we have Dr.Georgia Balsley on board, but I want to say a couple things before I introduce her. I wanted to welcome everybody. This is a series that we do twice a month, and we do it generally the first and the third, but sometimes it's the second and the fourth, depending. So, for example, next month it's going to be the week after July 4th, and I'll go into that a little bit more because July 4th is on a Thursday. But in any event, this is our series on getting to the root of it, and we really focus and target on certain diseases that are related to the autoimmune system, that are related to the microbiome system. And the microbiome system is your gut-brain axis. And many of you have heard about this. And for those of you that have not heard about it, the microbiome is basically the gut-brain axis. And your gut is basically your second brain. And this is where 80% of your communications are generated from your gut that connect and basically talk to your brain. And Dr. Georgia will go into that a little bit more into detail in a few minutes. But I also wanted to mention that, we've got a special guest on tonight, and David Eggers, and I'll be bringing him on later on. A very special story, special man, and excited to have him on board tonight. But I wanted to also mention that we are affiliated, we're really humbled to be affiliated with a holistic mental wellness company that focuses on the microbiome, which I said is the gut-brain axis. And we are all about science-backed, clinically trialed, and plant-based options, holistic options for people. And we're really excited about that because of the science, and more specifically with the microbiome research and the project that actually started in 2007, in the last 5 years has come out with some incredible studies that revert back to the gut in relation to anxiety, depression, which you'll hear, and leaky gut and irritable bowel syndrome, and so many more. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Georgia Balsley, and she is a traditional naturopath of 34 years. She resides in Michigan. And Dr. Georgia, just share with those listeners, a little bit about you and how you got into naturopathic medicine. Before the questions come up. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And yes, I was exposed to alternative or complementary medicine before the birth of my children, but it really held home and strong after the birth of my children. So I actually had a child that was failure to thrive, and also another one that had some injury, and started down more solidifying that holistic pathway, and that's where it stuck. It stuck. So my background was a corpsman in the military. I worked in cardiac cancer, finished out in the emergency room, and my goal was actually to be a physician. At that time, I was looking at nuclear or forensic medicine. At that time, we didn't have CT scans or MRI machines, and that was up and coming. But I was thwarted into the complementary medicine world, and love what I do. I like helping the body heal on a more holistic platform, and using it as an adjunct therapy in traditional therapy, allopathic medicine. So I now have a dream job. I work with a functional physician. And so our tagline is, she can do things I can't, I can do things she can't, but together we can do great things.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for that introduction, and thank you for your service. That's great. So we've been seeing a lot on the news, in the newspaper, even on Facebook, about anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and a whole plethora of different autoimmune diseases, and how they are really coming back into as a result of the microbiome, which is your gut-brain axis. Now, there I understand that there's similarities and differences between anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. And with that, can you provide some, medical insight into those differences and similarities, and how they relate to the microbiome?
Absolutely. And so, I've said over and over again, an inflamed gut leads to an inflamed brain. And what's very interesting is I was doing a gut therapy before we've even had the fullness of the knowledge that we have today. And so, there are different causal factors for anxiety. However, anxiety and depression often have lapover symptomology. And so 50%, roughly 50% of those diagnosed with depression also have the overlapping anxiety issues. And so it's really important to communicate with your provider what you're feeling, because so that you can get better and more targeted health care. And so being honest with mood and how you're feeling, if I'm weepy, if I feel sweaty and anxious all the time, heart palpitations, I'm not able to wind it down at sleep at night. I'm feeling really nervous and jittery all the time, or I just have a lot of empathy and lack of motivation. I'm just not able to function, and I feel very withdrawn, and my moods suffer. I can be lashing out to the ones that I love, and I really don't want to feel that way. Oftentimes I really have no focus of really getting up out of bed, or wanting the things that bring us joy in life, from children to grandchildren to maybe our career or even our surroundings. And so it's really critical that we speak with our healthcare provider openly and really remove the stigma, because what's been really exciting is that many people now have come forward. We have movie stars galore that are now talking about depression and their anxiety and how it has affected their whole livelihood, and becoming free from that lifts a lot of baggage and a lot of weight, and then they can be targeted with their care. And the other thing that I think I want our listeners to know, that there is not one person in the world that at one time in their life could be diagnosed clinically depressed. Life is hard. From the stressors of having to pay bills to, making sure that there's food on the table, and wondering the stability of our jobs. So letting a listener know that it's okay, and that when we are experiencing those, there is help available.
That's great. Yes, and I agree with everything that you said. Life is hard, and it presents its challenges. And who hasn't been anxious or depressed, or even had suicidal thoughts? And so that's very, very insightful. So thank you for that. And we talked about it's not just in your mind. So
right.
Share a little bit about that that gut feeling, and how that really relates to really transitioning up to the mind through that little old big vagus nerve that we all have.
Yes. So it isn't. And we think because of depression and anxiety that there has to be something wrong with our mind. And that's absolutely not true. Roughly 90% of the neurotransmitter serotonin is made in the gut. And roughly when I talk about neurotransmitters, roughly 70% of all neurotransmitters are made in the gut, that equality. I mean, we have neurotransmitters from serotonin, which we're all familiar with. We have medications out like Paxil and Wellbutrin. Not one of us are not familiar with hearing about those drugs. And then we have dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that helps us feel satisfied and really helps with that more get up and go and that gumption and feeling energized. And then we have a neurotransmitter called GABA. And I call GABA nature's chill pill. It's that neurotransmitter that when it's released, it's that everything's going to be okay. And oftentimes, individuals that are suffering with depression and especially anxiety are extremely low in that neurotransmitter. So how can it be not a head thing because I feel it in my head? It's because it's coming from the gut. We have specific microbiota. We have literally hundreds of thousands of microorganisms that live in our gut that are called microbiota, that do many chemical exchanges. And one of the things they do is target our neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. And so if we have an inflamed gut, something such as leaky gut, we're not absorbing well and assimilating, our diets are not right, it affects that microbiota that makes that exchange. So what else suffers from it? Our brain. So it isn't in our head, it's in our gut, and that's the focus we really need to look at if we're going to really see some shifts and changes in things such as anxiety and depression.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's really, it's very interesting how the science is really coming up with that. Too bad we didn't have this 50 or 100 years ago, but
I know.
you know, it's better late than never. So earlier I talked about the Microbiome Project. There are a lot of studies that are going out there in relation to the research of these neurotransmitters, and we've only just begun scratching the surface. And so with that, you know, what has been your experience in, you know, finding these no associations with your partner in your practice, and the relationship between functional medicine and your naturopathic holistic medicine?
That's a great question, Jeff. And one of the things that's really exciting about functional medicine is that we're looking at root causes. Same thing in my world that we're looking at. We're not interested in putting a Band-Aid on something. We're wanting to find out what is the causation factor and addressing that so that we have overall regained health. And I think that's critical, especially in the medical world today. When we go to the doctor, we're really kind of getting tired of being, you know, one pill to another pill to another pill. And it's really not doing the job that we're really hoping for. And so by looking at the causation, we can help bring that body back into balance and target that. So many times we see not only adults, but we also see children, from autism to ODD, ADHD, ADD, you know, functional issues, and as well as adults that, you know, suffering anxiety and depression, and it all points back to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oftentimes they have this inflamed gut, and so if we can get to the root cause, which is, I call it the gas tank of the body, because we're eating and we're digesting, but those chemical conversions that take place in the gut, if your body cannot assimilate those, you're going to have an issue. It would be no different than your car. If you have a clog in the fuel filter from getting that fuel to the engine, your car's not going to run well. Well, it happens the same way as the body. And the body gives us those check engine lights, and we would never drive our car and the check engine light comes on and then we put masking tape over it and just keep driving the car. We're going to take it for some diagnostics and figure out what's going on with it. Well, our body's doing the same thing. And some of the simplest things are, you know, from headaches to fatigue to, you know, some joint discomfort, gas and bloating, you know, I'm not sleeping well, things like anxiety, depression, often follow into those lines because it keeps building and building and building because our body's really trying to get our attention, say, listen, something's not right here. And we point almost always back to, well, I'm going to say almost always to the gut, because that is the beginning of everything.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's really unique science today. Today, you know, we talked about that. I think that, let's see, anxiety, depression, suicide, thoughts really relate back to a lot of the diseases that are out there. And, you know, I'm talking about, you know, when you talk about abuse, whether it's mental, physical, or even sexual abuse, or, you know, when there's a death in the family, or let's see, when it's genetics, okay, or even life's journeys, you know, for women going through menopause, or autoimmune or diseases like diabetes, you know. So Can you provide some insight into that from now, with you coming on board now and really learning more about the microbiome and seeing how that really fits into all of this? And when somebody's diabetic, they go through some anxiety, some depression, or if they're, well, obviously, abuse, physical, mental, or sexual abuse. These are results of these traumatic experiences or these serious illnesses.
Right. And we have to understand stress is one of the biggest killers, but stress affects our microbiome. We don't understand that the acids and things, it changes the pH structure in which those little buddies live and thrive. So those circumstances affect a lot of our well-being because they've affected the stress levels that we've endured.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is not only does the microbiota play a huge role in neurotransmitter function, but it plays a huge role in hormonal makeup because of the different chemical sensors that are released in the body that sometimes they might be just a small part to interact, but they may be the total active compound. And so when we're not really having a good structure, a good diversity of microbiome in the gut, we're going to suffer with things such as anxiety, depression, hormonal imbalances. You often see microbiome imbalance. I mean, the studies are leading to type 1 diabetes and seeing a huge shift in the microbiome balance. And it's interesting that the microbiome releases certain chemicals to the endocrine glands. So it affects things like our cortisol levels. We don't think about that. So, metabolic syndrome, why people are, having the insulin resistance and then getting the big belly. Things like even hormonal uptake such as ghrelin and being able to break down glycogen, which is an issue with diabetes.
Right.
And that whole HPA axis, from being able to make those conversions from tryptophan to melatonin so we can sleep. So it really is critical. It's not just a female thing. It's both sexes it affects.
That's right. Men have hormones too.
They do.
They do.
They do.
Awesome. That's great. So I understand that probiotics are a huge asset to those who are suffering anxiety, depression, and having suicidal thoughts. And obviously, probiotics, many people have heard about that, but can you share what you have found in your practice, some of the results by introducing probiotics to those individuals going through whatever they're going through, and how the probiotics has helped them and what some of the results have been?
Sure. So one of the things is, again, we talked about the diversity and then bringing back a good amount of probiotic or flora microbiota to the gut. And so people think, well, hey, I'm on a probiotic, I should be good to go. But not all probiotics were created equal either. And so when we talk about things like neurotransmitters, so today our topic is depression and anxiety, it is critical to have specific probiotics that will gear towards the neurotransmitter function. So will help build those serotonin levels, help build those dopamine levels, help with that conversion of GABA. And if we're not using those, sure, we're seeding the gut and creating some positive change, but we're not seeing the change in the neurotransmitters. So we use specific probiotics because the strains are geared to that. These probiotics seem to win out almost every time, I have to tell you. Even the doc I work with is pretty amazed. But when we have our patients come back and say, I feel like me again, I haven't felt this good in a long time, you've done your job, and they're starting to see the results of that, and just help to reseed that gut with those specific flora so that they can see those results. And we're seeing it in children as well as adults. It's
right.
A broad spectrum.
That's great. Yeah, that's really wonderful. So, we talked about the specific neurotransmitters targeting within the gut that connect with the brain to make that association between the gut and the brain to open up and make them feel good. and make them feel better. So when people are looking for probiotics, we know that there's a lot in the pharmacies, a lot in the supermarkets, a lot at health food stores. How does one really know that they're getting a good probiotic? And share a little bit. I know that you're using a special plant-based probiotic. And can you just associate, give an example of some of the differences between some of the ones that are out in the market and some of the ones that you are using in your practice?
Well, one of the most common lactobacillus probiotics, and you'll find that in almost all probiotics, but it's a strain actually designed for diarrhea. And so we take that, and if we don't have that issue, we can create constipation. And not all strains are alike, and not all strains do the same thing. So strains matter. And so in this specific probiotic is really designed for that gut-brain axis, that communication, and really helping proliferate those neurotransmitters. And you can say, well, what happens with the rest of everything? There's nothing wrong in taking a broad spectrum probiotic, but these ones are specifically targeted to see that connection and send those signals to the brain so that we can see the shifts and changes that we're looking for.
Awesome. That's great. That's really wonderful. Great. So we're coming up onto the half hour here. And what I'd like to do next, thank you, Dr. Georgia, first.
My pleasure.
For that wonderful information, and hope everybody out there has gotten some really great value out of this so far. What I'd like to do next is I'm going to bring David Eggers on. And I just asked him to pop on. There he is. And David, hi. Say hi. Let me make sure that we can hear you.
Yeah, hi.
Perfect. Yes. So David is I'm gonna mess this up. Bagota?
Bagoda. That's okay.
Bagoda. He's from Bagoda, New Jersey. David is a dad of 2 beautiful children, and he's a husband. He's also a director, choreographer, entertainer, and a life enthusiast. And what I want to do is I'm going to read just a little bit of this. David's story starts with, "No one would have guessed I was in the darkest depression I'd ever known. Those who knew me had no idea either. After all, I was, by all accounts, a success." Let's have David tell the rest of his story. So please welcome David Eggers from New Jersey. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Georgia. I really enjoyed listening to everything you just shared. Yeah, so Jeffrey, it's a pleasure to be on here tonight and to tell my story. And, to look back on it now, I wrote that you just quoted in May 11th of last year. And it feels like a different person, to be honest with you. But I'm going to go back there first and talk about how I found myself in what I described as my darkest depression. And then if I have time, I'd like to talk about where I'm at now too.
Absolutely.
All right. So prior to writing that post and sliding into the end of 2017, I was discovering new depths of depression, feelings of anxiety that I had never known before. And like I said in that thing that you quoted, no one would have known it because by all accounts, I was very much a successful person in my community, in my chosen career. I was at the top of my career for about 15 years, married, 2 kids, a house, couple of cars in the driveway. I mean, externally looking at everything, it all looked amazing, but something was going on and I was really struggling. The circumstances were such that I hadn't worked for a while and I was struggling with not being able to support my family the way I had been used to supporting my family. And so there were circumstantial things that were challenging me, but I'm very resourceful. And I've always been drawn to health and working out and supplements and taking care of myself because the career that I'd chosen was as a dancer and a singer and an actor. So my body is my instrument. And so I've always been very health conscious. So all of those kinds of physical health tools were very familiar to me, had given me much support and success, and just kind of, you know, trying to stay my healthy version of me all those many years. I was noticing though that that I was not thriving as much as I'd been used to, and the stress of my changing circumstances, and like I said, you know, the financial issues. I mean, so many people can relate to that probably, but that stress was compounding. It was prolonged stress, and it was really starting to take a toll on me in ways that I couldn't quite figure out. So I did some more searching, and I grabbed onto journaling, I grabbed onto meditation, I started incorporating those, and those gave me a little bit of relief. And I would take, like, you know, a step forward, but then and then at some point I took 2 steps back. And so I did some gratitude practice, and I was doing all of these things that were really valuable in themselves and surely contributed, but I wasn't gaining, I was losing ground. And I could not for the life of me figure it out. Now, here's another circumstance of my situation. I didn't have health insurance. I couldn't afford the plan that was available to me through the marketplace, if anybody knows what that is. And so I was going without insurance. So I couldn't even go get medical help because I unfortunately couldn't make that payment. So just to let you know where I came from, I'm going to go a little bit farther into some of what I was experiencing, because things got so bad that I turned inward. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my spouse. None of my friends knew. And I was at a point where I was having such terrible stomach aches that I would be able to get up in the morning and try to help with the kids and get them off to school for about an hour, maybe 2 hours. They'd get out of the house, and I'd have to go lay back down in bed for hours at a time. And if it wasn't the stomach aches, it was the debilitating headaches, which may have been coming from the stress that I was carrying in my physical body. I had a lot of body aches as well. And when you feel like that and you can't figure out what's going on or why or who to turn to, you start to feel, and also you've been so successful and, you know, got so many great things. You should be grateful. You shouldn't be feeling this way. There's shame that comes in. And then you start to think, well, if I can't provide and I can't climb out of this hole, then what good am I? You know? And so then you start moving into some of those suicidal thoughts that are part of tonight's topic. And, you know, I've got 2 beautiful kids. I've got a wonderful family, and, you know, it was a terribly dark, difficult time for me in which I felt alone and nowhere to turn to and no way out. And I was losing ground daily, and I didn't know how much longer I could exist, to be honest. And this was, so that darkest place was probably the turn of the year of 2018. In February, mid-February 2018, a friend reached out on a whim to tell me about a new mental wellness company that was offering some holistic options, and she was really excited about this company, and she was going to be part of it. And she didn't want me to hear it through the rumorville. She just wanted me to know about it, and I didn't tell her what was going on. But we got off the phone, and then I went and I looked up information about it, and it was like it had been sent to me by some divine energy or something. And I was so desperate and so secretly in pain and suffering that I called her back, and I said, "You don't know this, but I need to try what this company's offering." So even though I didn't have the money, I found the money, and I went and I got the main protocol of these holistic, plant-based mental wellness products from this company, and just kind of crossed my fingers. And I knew that I wasn't, you know, don't expect miracles, etc. But I am not kidding you. within a couple of weeks, I was feeling a difference, a noticeable difference. And I thought to myself, it's got to be placebo, you know, this can't be real. So, but I hung in there, kind of still crossing my fingers and holding my breath. And by the end of my first month, I was starting to tell myself, this is undeniable. Something's shifting, because the stomach aches stopped, the headaches lessened, and I started to see an uptick in my energy, and I was able to stay out of bed a little bit longer than I had been, and I was having more full days of being able to show up for life, where I wasn't able to do that before. So, you know, I really was in a bad spot. Okay. And now I was in I was like, these were like maybe small but significant differences for me. Then I went into my second month on the products, and things started to shift even more. And so then my like focus was coming back, and I had enough energy that I was engaging with my family more. And I was starting to re-engage socially a little bit. And on social media, I had disappeared completely. I was starting to like the turn of events. I was starting to like how I was feeling. I had no more headaches. I had no more stomach aches. My energy was back up. So then, you know what that did is that because I felt like that, I was like, oh, well, maybe I can go back to the gym. Maybe I can work out a little bit. And so I found myself in the gym, and because I worked out a little bit, then that releases certain hormones in the body, right? And so then I started feeling, you know, good about that. And then I went into my third month of products, and I was like the sun came out, like the light was back in my life. The light was showing up in my eyes. I was showing up for my family. I was starting to like myself again. And it had been a long time, and that made a huge difference. And so I was completely re-engaging, and I really think that, you know, these products, these protocols, these holistic plant-based mental wellness products were a lifeline for me. Okay, and that was just the beginning. And I didn't know that it could get even better. But if I can have a few more minutes of your time, I'd like to tell you about what's happened since these products, you know, they gave me that boost or that ladder that I needed to climb out of that hole that I was in. And then, like I said, because I started to like myself more, I was making different choices. And also all those tools that I had been trying to use, they became effective again. You know, so the journaling started to work. The gratitude practice really started to make a difference. And the meditation really started to work. And the exercise was working, and I was sleeping better. So that also compounded the positive improvements. And so what I like to tell people is that was really the ladder that got me out. And then the things that I was incorporating naturally, just because of who I am, plus these holistic products, put me on an upward spiral. And so now, jump ahead a year later, after I wrote the post that you were quoting before, we're moving in 2 weeks from where we've lived for 16 years to in northern New Jersey to Salt Lake City, because I'm starting a new career as a teacher, as a professor at a university.
Awesome.
Now, what I want people to realize is that putting myself out there with and taking the risk of putting myself out there and having the strength and the resilience that I needed to put myself out there, that never would have been possible had I not been introduced to these products, been open enough to try them, been encouraged enough to stick with them, and hung in there. And like, I'm just so grateful. So now, really, what I really want to communicate today is that the results of my experience, the journey that I've been on, has gotten better and better and better. It didn't stop last May. It kept getting better, and I kept feeling better. And so I went from really feeling terrible and bad to feeling okay, and that was awesome. I was excited. But then I continued with the products and taking care of myself because now I liked myself again. So then I went from feeling okay to feeling good. And then I just was like, well, I love it. I love it. What else is on the other side of this? So then I went from feeling good to feeling great. And then I went from great to feeling amazing. And now this whole new lease on life is just starting for me. And it's thrilling for me. It's fantastic for my family. I'm providing for my family in a way that I never could before. And I'm 48 years old. I feel, I'm not going to say I feel younger, because I don't know if that's the right description, but I feel more zest for life right now than I felt in probably a couple of decades, to be honest. And I just, here's the other thing I want people to know is, like, if you could put your life on a scale, your day on a scale from like 1 being feeling the worst you could possibly feel to 10 being the best you could possibly feel. In the beginning, I was hovering around that 1, 2, lucky if I found a 3. But now I've progressed up that scale over this last year and year and a couple of months or whatever that I've been incorporating these products and feeling better about myself and doing, taking care of myself in a new way. Now I have 9s and 10s. And when I have a bad day, because life still happens, I'm not, we all still have challenging days. And I've got 2 kids, they test me every day. But now, instead of like crumbling and being back here at 1 or a 0, I go from a 10 to maybe like a 7. Awesome. So my worst day is still an awesome day. And that's my story.
That's great. Thank you, David. What an inspiring story. Amazing. You've really gone and transitioned from really, really low to really, really high. And it's an amazing story. And I'm sure that you're going to impact a lot of people with that, because, we're looking for stories like this because it's relatability. And I relate to a lot of the things that you say, for sure, in many ways. So, but thank you for that. And
my pleasure.
So we're coming up on the 45 minutes here. I got 2 more minutes. I'm going to wrap up here, but, so I wanted to thank Dr. Georgia Balsley tuning in from Michigan, and then David Eggers coming in from New Jersey. And I did want to mention that for those of you who were invited to this webinar tonight, reach out to those who invited you to get some more information and follow up with them, okay? And, the next we're going to do in July, the next one's going to be July 11th. July 4th is scheduled, the next one, but obviously it's 4th of July. We're not going to do it. So July 11th and then July 25th will be diabetes part 1 and part 2. And then we haven't decided what we're going to do in August, but our platform here is getting to the root of it. As Dr. Georgia said earlier, we need to get to the root of what's going on and see how we can reverse it and or eliminate it. Okay, that's our goal. So I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We really are blessed that you have joined us. I want to again thank Dr. Georgia and David for joining us live tonight. And stay tuned. If you do want the recording, I will have the recording on a YouTube link. Get back to either David, Georgia, or myself, and I'll be glad to, or we'll be glad to provide that link for you. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. You have a great night. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.